Hi. Hi, it's you. Okay, I brought my extra brain, but I don't think I'm going to need it, just in case. Okay, so when I first had my son, Raven, when I first found out he was in my womb, I was not ready to be a mother. And the news came to me just a short year after the unexpected death of my own mother. My partner, James, and I were at a great point in our relationship, but we had certainly never discussed having children. I remember feeling terrified that he wouldn't receive the news well. But when I showed him the positive test, he actually cracked a smile. And just like that, the next chapter of our lives had begun. One thing was clear: my lifestyle was not set up to support a pregnancy either. My relationship with food was based entirely on survival. Like, I ran on espresso fumes and ate microwave burritos on the run, just to stop my head from spinning. My relationship with my pre-pregnancy body was one of seething criticism. Whenever I railed up against my grief or darkness, I would light up a smoke, drive recklessly, plan my next drink, never sitting with my emotions. Due to my newfound sobriety, early pregnancy felt like coming home to myself, but the floors were all littered and the lights burnt out. Over the next few weeks, I found the willpower to make many unlikely changes in my lifestyle. I was reading Ina May Gaskin books, nourishing my mind and body, instead of running for myself. Somehow, when I found out I was pregnant, I found the willpower to quit my decade-old smoking habit, just like flipping a light switch. I began to feel like an entirely different woman, and even I almost couldn't believe it. I might need my extra brain. Hold on. I need a cue here. All right. All the technicalities of pregnancy, though, stress me to no end. My friends and family watched from the very distant sidelines, and Google would give me run-of-the-mill advice. I remember thinking, this is the point at which one should call their mother for advice. And her absence from this rite of passage continued to sting. But even if I could call her, I couldn't even imagine what she would have said. Maybe she would have come with me to our ultrasound appointments and cried when we saw that little heartbeat up on the screen. But she didn't. And when I researched the astronomical cost of a hospital birth in our area, I decided we'd just have our baby in the living room instead. The rounder my belly grew, the louder my spirit and intuition spoke to me. It was as if someone had turned up the volume knob on my soul. Forgiveness, realizations, and perspective poured into me. I used this newfound clarity to set my intentions for our birth. Our wonderful midwife would often ask me, what do I feel comfortable with? What do I need? I felt so supported. I wondered if the women who had come before me had ever been asked what they would like. Our son Raven was born in our sunny living room, just as we planned. Labor was intense and powerful. Everything I'd ever hoped for. I watched beautiful mandalas behind my eyelids as he descended. James held me in all the right ways and bore witness to a miracle that day too. After everything settled, we snuggled into life with a newborn, and it felt just like a dream. Of course, I was sore, and sleep was elusive. But we all had each other. I felt invincible and so proud of myself in those moments. But with each day that passed after the birth, I grew increasingly uncomfortable with my dwindling savings. Though I needed to, I couldn't imagine returning to work at the post office in the mail processing plant. A couple of weeks before I was set to return, my boss from the post office called to let me know that I was scheduled to come back just after the weekend. I stumbled my way through the rest of that conversation in complete shock. It was made very clear to me that my job depended on my early return. Rage wrenched at my gut. Earlier, I'd been thinking, just 10 days left with this little angel until it all changes. And now, with just one phone call, it had become only one. That moment in early motherhood marked the beginning of my feeling unheld by the world. When I told James, he argued, said there must be something we can do. But I didn't have any answers. And to make matters worse, the training that I was to attend was in a city hours away. Here I was with my squirming newborn, who had never left the safety of our home, packing him into his car seat to drive across the state with $3 in my pocket, all for a job that considered me to be a machine. Tears streamed down my face, and my breast leaked onto my shirt as I drove across the country highway that night, unheld. Luckily, the training passed by quickly, but I was stone cold and absolutely not willing to forgive society for their detached and heartless expectations of me. Jumping back into a structured schedule proved to be a challenge. I showed up ready to work, but my brain and body kept trying to float away from me back to my babe all day long. I remember pumping in the back of our paint van on my first day back to work. Clueless, running out of batteries, spilling milk all over the upholstery. Having a good cry, and returning to work, all in 15 minutes. Over the next few months, the only thing that grew any easier was the routine of it all. I fell back into work and learned the ropes of parenting. I had grown accustomed to pumping at work in the only room with a lock, the restroom. The lighting was dim and the grout smelled terrible. I would set my noisy pump in the sink and sit on the toilet while I ate my lunch, since there wasn't enough time to do both separately. When I would sneak away, my coworkers would roll their eyes at my extra breaks, as if eating my lunch in a filthy restroom was some type of tropical getaway. I realized how bizarre this all was at the time, but I could see no other way. Sometimes the judgment of my coworkers would deter me from pumping on schedule, especially when our workload was heavy, like Christmas time. That was when the mastitis began. Over the course of my first year back to work, I had mastitis 6 times. It always came on like a fiery flu, complete exhaustion, burning breast pain, and of course, the continued responsibility of keeping a tiny human alive. As usual, James encouraged me to stand up for myself, to fight back. But I barely had any fight left in me at that point. I could hardly drag myself to my graveyard shifts at the post office. My 10-month-old seemed to wake every hour to nurse, and I never got more than 4 hours of sleep at night. When I tried to tell others that I was feeling increasingly worn down, And they'd smile and tell me, that's just how babies are. Enjoy it. They'd recommend a massage, a babysitter, a night out. All things that were completely out of my reach. My budget, patience, and heart were being stretched to their absolute limits. Affording childcare at that point was entirely out of the question. And we did not have that type of support from family. Unheld again by the world. James and I worked opposite shifts, and still are, 5 years later. We saw each other for a quick kiss and to hand off the baby. With the raw emotions of new parenthood coursing through our veins, the few minutes we had to connect were simply not enough. Our lack of communication turned into a deep hurt for us both as we struggled separately. With all of the stress, time spent with Raven began to feel like sandpaper on my nerves. I adored him more than anyone in the world, but on hard days, my patience and expectations for myself would go right out the window. If I was feeling particularly anxious, I'd send a text to James to check in. If he didn't respond immediately, I would drive myself into a frenzy, worrying about all of the terrible things that could have possibly, certainly, definitely happened to them. I remember the feeling of holding my breath until he's just X number of months old, or until he just says Y, as if then everything was going to be okay. James, of course, noticed my empathetic nature taking a turn for Monster Mama. He reminded me of our gentle parenting philosophy, of my capacity to love, but all I could hear was judgment. At the peak of my postpartum challenges, I feared that my kind heart had begun to curdle. I laid the eye rolls on heavy, insinuated blame with my tone, and completely lost my chill. I'd rock Raven back to sleep at night for what felt like a literal eternity. I'd lay him back down in his crib and immediately hear the dog next door begin to bark incessantly, like it always did. His eyes would shoot back open, followed shortly thereafter by his cries. I probably imagined a million ways to shut that dog up. I swore I'd kill it if it kept barking. And it always did. I wrote letters in my head to the neighbors about how hard this all was. I thought these feelings were going to last forever, but they didn't. Just before Raven's first birthday, I decided to ditch the graveyard shifts and take a pay cut. I agonized over how we would afford things, but decided that it was in my best interest. This marked an epic epiphany for me. The moment I gave myself permission to take what I needed. See, I'd always assumed exhaustion a badge of honor, and scars to be a point of pride. But now I realized that rest, forgiveness, were better gifts to myself. I started sleeping for a few hours at night and began to recognize myself again. We started getting out of the house, and I remembered all of my favorite things about being alive, like the smell of damp spring soil or the feeling of a sticky Ferris wheel ride under the moon. Now, even sweeter because I could share them with my son, his heart full of innocent wonder. James and I began having the hard conversations. He and everyone else had been telling me all along, stop being so hard on myself. But those were only words to me until I felt the waves of mastitis misery roll over me, until I felt my eyelids grow heavy like lead, until I heard that damn dog barking the whole night through. I had to fight tooth and nail for my well-being as a new mother, because I was unheld by the world at large. Now, I am thriving, poring over midwifery textbooks, attending births in the wee hours of the night. Not tonight. Madly in love with my family and the sacredness of it all. But the truth is, my story should have been different. Our systems are failing us. Mothers everywhere from all walks of life are blistering under the pressure that's increasing in our society. As a whole, we're beginning to realize that comfort and balance are becoming harder and harder to find in modern motherhood. I cannot think of anything more important than taking care of mothers. After all of this began with a mother. Thank you.